Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here today. We will begin shortly. All right, I think I'm going to begin. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Vicki Saylor, and I'm the Arizona Regional Manager. Today, we have two very special guests with us from UnidosUS. We have Dr. Ingrid Colón and Selene Tituaña Jurado with us today. Hello, everybody. How are you guys?
Great, Vicki. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for being here. Thank you so much, Selene, for being here. We're so excited to have you here today. This is such an honor that you have made the time to be here today. I just wanted to remind everybody that this conversation will also be posted to this Common Sense YouTube channel, Common Sense Education YouTube channel, along with all of the links and resources that we share and discuss in our chat today. So let's begin, because we don't have a lot of time and we want to make sure that we get to everything that these two wonderful ladies are going to share with us today. So let's get started. Dr. Colón, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and UnidosUS?
Sure, gracias. Thank you, Vicki.
Sí, de nada.
Buenas tardes. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is, just like Vicki mentioned, Dr. Ingrid Colón, and I'm the Education Research Program Manager at UnidosUS. My pronouns are ella, she, her, hers, and I'm joining you from the ancestral lands of the Nacoshtang indigenous people that we now know as Washington, D.C. I want to thank the Common Sense Media team for hosting this chat and for all of the support that is needed to make this event happen. And thank you for the invitation to share this space with all of you today and being in community. I also want really quickly thank all of you, the educators, school administrators, school counselors, social workers, families, and all of the participants joining us today for everything that you have been doing this past year to serve your students. Thank you so much for all the work that you do. So now, a little bit of information about UnidosUS, formerly known as the National Council of La Raza, NCLR, is the nation's largest Latinx civil rights and advocacy organization. Through our unique combination of research, advocacy programs, and a national network of nearly 300 community-based affiliate organizations across the country, we simultaneously challenge the social, economic, and political barriers that affect the Latinx community in the United States. And in my role as the Education Research Program Manager within the education component at UnidosUS, I research about whole student learning practices that leverage Latinx students and their families' identities to better serve them across the country.
Thank you so much. And then we also have Selene with us. Can you please introduce yourself to us?
Yes, thank you, Vicki and Ingrid, for sharing the space with me. And I do want to echo Ingrid's gratefulness for the educators, especially during this time. So with that said, my name is Selene Tituaña Jurado. My pronouns are ella, she, her, and hers. I'm also connecting from the ancestral lands of the Anacostan, very close to Southeast DC. At UnidosUS, I am the program specialist for the health component. Our work emphasizes practices and promotes health equity by building healthy and resilient communities, and also addressing the social determinants of health, which I will touch more during this conversation. As many of you, during the COVID-19 pandemic, our gears have shifted, and we're currently responding to the pandemic that is disproportionately impacting the lives of Black and Brown communities. And as a team, as a whole, we're always looking for ways to intersect our work, to connect with other colleagues, cross organizations, and this conversation is a great example of this, as we discuss students' well-being in the context of education and its implications in their academic success.
Thank you so much for your background. I think it's so important to know exactly who we have here and get to know them a little bit before we begin. In speaking with you both last week, I learned what a beautiful story you both had. The experiences that you had are also very important to talk about. Can you talk about those experiences, especially as a student, and how that has had some maybe long-term implications that have affected your overall learning experiences, maybe even your physical and mental health? Who would like to start?
Sure. I will go ahead and get started. So I always like to share my story, Vicky, because my experiences as an immigrant and emerging bilingual student in U.S. schools have deeply impacted and influenced my positionality as an educator, as a researcher, and advocate for the work that I do. So I don't end up reproducing the same harms that I experienced as a student myself. So I was born in the beautiful country of El Salvador, and my parents took the difficult decision to immigrate to the United States when I was 14 years old. I think my experiences as a student, learning the English language, has brought a lot of trauma and pain that has deeply impacted my overall well-being and learning experiences. Even now, after being here in the United States for 23 years, I still feel that these experiences have caused a lot of trauma and long-lasting insecurities in everything that I do, and that I'm constantly trying to find ways to heal from these experiences. So just to share a little bit about this with you, when I started high school as a recently arriving immigrant, it was from the very, very beginning, from the very first day, that I felt that I was being treated a little differently, right? And began experiencing linguistic racism and xenophobia. I was placed in an ESL classroom where other emerging bilingual students like me were not really engaged in any type of intellectual experiences. I definitely felt that the approach that my school took for students like me who didn't speak English was to take the sink or swim approach. And pretty much it was all about either you assimilate to this culture and learn English, or you will not succeed. So I think my experiences across high school, college, and graduate school have always focused on a monolingual, monocultural way of teaching, where the English language is prioritized and is the language of prestige. And I really felt that, I felt it because, for example, I experienced situations where people will make fun of my accent, or teachers made me feel that my writing skills weren't clear or professional enough. So all of these experiences have really offered and affected my overall learning. I mean, pretty much it really have impacted my overall learning experiences. Also my physical and mental health, because I really tend to doubt myself in many ways. So even with all the educational and professional accomplishments that I have now, I still have that, I still take a longer time to communicate, whether it's by writing or expressing myself verbally in English, because of those insecurities, right? And fears that I have experienced since I started my journey learning English. So they really have left these long-lasting effects in my life that produce unnecessary and additional anxieties and stress that impact my physical, mental health, and overall well-being. So really, I just wanted to share with all of you that it is because of this story and my experiences that in my work as a researcher, I focus on not reproducing the same harms that I went through. And by critically removing those barriers beyond schools that really impact the learning experiences of our recently arrived immigrant students learning a new language in our schools.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to be able to connect that way, because the work that you do is even more powerful and meaningful. I do share a similar background, but I want to hear from Selene, because I know that she also would like to share her story with us.
Thank you, Vicky. Yeah, talking with Ingrid, we found out that we come from very similar backgrounds. So my story resonates with her. I also immigrated from Ecuador with my family to the U.S. when I was 11 years old. I entered the school system almost immediately, and I was placed in ESOL. In middle school, although I knew very little of what it was like to be supported as a student in a system completely foreign to me, I found it gratifying that as an 11-year-old, my school teachers and my counselor, I spoke my language, and they took the time to learn more about my culture, my family, and where I came from. And I still remember the little check-ins they had with me when my mom's sitting next to me as they got to learn my needs. But also there was a great emphasis in learning my abilities. I like to say that my high school experience was much different. I did not have the same support I had when I was in middle school, and I found myself kind of shying away even more at practicing my English language skills at that time. And that was really hard for me as a student. And I think, just as Ingrid, I think it's very important to point and to highlight that when you have a student in front of you who is an English learner, being an English learner is not a full representation of who we are and how we are at home and what we know to do in our native language. So when teachers judge the student on the fact that they're learning English, they're completely missing the full potential of that student. And I felt like that happened to me as well when I was in high school. So I had two types of educators in my educational experience. I had teachers who didn't want to take the time to get to know me, to get to know my needs. But on the other hand, I also had teachers who were understanding and they generally wanted to see me succeed in school. And going back to my story in high school, because I felt a lack of support academically and I didn't feel challenged, just how Ingrid mentioned in her story, my parents decided to take me out of ESOL. I had to go through the process. I had to test out. But my parents were warned that if I didn't do well in regular classes, the responsibility basically laid on us. So this was very discouraging to hear as a student, as an English learner. I definitely felt anxious, scared. My self-confidence kind of depleted. And I thought that I was going to fail my classes because of this comments that I heard from my own teachers. Yeah. So it took a while to build my confidence, and I think it wasn't until college where I built my little confidence in me as I gathered new skills and also felt challenged intellectually from the materials that I was given. So I think that my educational journey in the US, I often found myself being my own advocate for my own needs, while also navigating my classes as an undocumented student, and then later as a DACA recipient. And for those who don't know what DACA is a immigration relief that allows individuals who were brought to this country as children, like myself, to receive immunity from deportation and a work permit to lawfully work in the US. But this didn't happen until I was in college in 2012, 2013. So my immigration status was a big factor shaping my education And as a first generation student, my support system looked very different from other students who were US citizens. Navigated my education differently because educators did not know what to do with an undocumented student who wanted to go to college. So there were
let me just, because you're bringing up some really great points, and we know that, it's really easy to overlook that students do bring with them more than just their language. And you've pointed out some really great points. And you did mention something about celebrating all of these linguistic abilities of our children and their cultural practices. And you said you used a term that I should have known, but you use the term TransLanguaging as a pedagogical approach that honors this multilingualism. Can you talk about that?
Sure, Vicky. So yes, I actually would like to share that strategy and also a couple of other recommendations. Just to echo what Selene mentioned, that we want to really have a complete picture of all the fabulous strengths, that our students learning another language bring to our school spaces. So before I get to that, Vicky, I would like to share that I think the first thing we need to provide is a more humane and transformational educational experiences where joy, love, and the overall well-being of our students are always prioritized. Let's create those spaces where all of our students' full humanity is at the center and where they feel welcome and celebrated.
Absolutely.
Right? It makes a lot of sense.
Totally.
And then we must get to know our students' stories, right? Just like Selene and I just share our stories with all of you, we can also share our stories with our students. And we must get to know our students' stories, right? But not learning our students' stories from a deficit perspective, right? Where we assume our students are missing something or need to be saved from something. No, we need to genuinely become interested in getting to know our students to build a community with them. Also, because each one of our students' stories are different. So we must not make assumptions about their experiences or what we think they have gone through or are experiencing. At the same time, we must build a community with their families as well. Very important. I know that family engagement is a priority of ours, right? So we need to do this by building collaborative relationships with respect, love, and care with our families. So I think somebody on the chat, was asking about like great strategies, like you mentioned, to better serve our students that are learning another language. And the strategy that you mentioned, Vicky, it's perfect. I would say that celebrating all the multilingual linguistic abilities and cultural practices of our students must be included in the classroom. We can do this by TransLanguaging. And what is this, right? A lot of you might be thinking, what is this? This is the first time I'm hearing about TransLanguaging. And really, TransLanguaging as a pedagogical approach, it honors multilingual students' full linguistic repertoire. That means that TransLanguaging sustains our students' languages, where we recognize all of their linguistic abilities that leverages their strengths. And if this is, again, you still have more questions about it, don't worry. I have added a great resource for you to know more about what TransLanguaging practices are all about in our takeaway resources that we're going to have at the end of this chat. So you get more information there. And I just want to also mention 3 more things that we can think about to better serve our students learning English and other languages, right? We want to make sure that we are learning about the policies deeply affecting them at the federal, state, and local level. Just like Selene mentioned, I'm thinking about some of our students who may be undocumented, right? Or part of mixed status families, where one family member may be undocumented and may not have healthcare access. Think about the situation that we're living right now. They may not have healthcare access or housing services. So you really need to think about beyond the school space about how to advocate to really dismantle and take away those barriers and challenges our students are experiencing and are deeply affecting their learning.
Mm-hmm.
And just, the other thing that I wanted to mention is that we need to advocate for that social justice. And I know that Vicky has also some great resources for advocating for the social justice that our students, families, and community deserve. And reflection is so important to this work, right?
Mm-hmm.
To get to the social justice work, we need to self-reflect in our practice and everything that we do to better serve our students. And because I have also, I have been in the classroom. I was a dual language teacher. I was also a teacher educator at the university level. I know how hard this work is. So we must prioritize our self-care. I cannot leave this chat, right? I cannot leave this chat without sharing with all of you how important it is to engaging in self-love and self-care practices, because if we are not feeling well, there is no way we can do the type of work that all of our students need and deserve.
Right. And you bring up such a great point about knowing about the whole child, being inclusive, be welcoming, and not only to the student, but to their entire family, and really getting to know them. And, that communication is so important. And the social justice aspect of what our students of color are facing, like they have different challenges than other students might. And so being cognizant of that is so important as well. So thank you for sharing that. And I mean, this conversation could be 2 hours at least, it's so detailed, but we do have a lot of resources for you. We do have some back to school resources that you included as well. Some of the work that you've done for UnidosUS. And then I think Selene was talking about intersectionality, and she was talking about how there's more to your students than just, let's say, their language. Selene, do you want to talk about that a little bit before we wrap up?
Yes, for sure. I think it's important to emphasize that education is not in a silo, and I think Ingrid did a really good job at pointing that there's so many different factors affecting education and educational outcomes in a student. So always keep that in mind, that there's got to be more of a comprehensive approach, more of a holistic approach to the well-being and ensuring the academic success, especially during COVID-19, when things are constantly changing, and we have seen a big disparity, especially in the Latino community.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Dr. Colón, would you like to add anything that we might have missed, or something that you would like to highlight before we end?
No, I think, I appreciated Selene joining me in this chat as well, because that's the idea, right? We want to do this work very intersectional. We cannot be in silos and just thinking, how often we just think that we need to close our classroom doors, or now our virtual Zoom meetings, right? And just be focusing on our group of students. But we need to really go beyond that. We have to have this holistic picture of how everything really impacts our students, right? So very intersectional. It has to be intersectional work to truly be transformational for the type of education that our students need and deserve.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you both for being here, and I did want to leave some time if we had any other questions or anything that came up. We can wait a little while. We also have a survey that we would love for you to fill out. You can also earn credit for being here today, professional development credit. So look out for that as well. Selene and Dr. Colón, what would be the top 3 takeaways that you could just review for us? What would they be?
Sure. I think, going back to culture, I think it's important as educators to connect the curriculum to students' culture in creative ways. I think we had a discussion about, giving students a list of books by Latino authors, or a list of movies that connect back to Latino culture, I think we definitely want to change the Latino narrative, especially during these times where as a community we have been constantly ostracized and attacked. So I think it's important to diversify the curriculum to include our art, our culture, our stories, our history as Latinos in this country.
Right. And I think of all kids of color,
Mhm.
you know, we need to be mindful of that. And we do have resources also for digital footprint in our digital curriculum and our digital citizenship curriculum that we were talking about on how our kids are, you know, expressing themselves online, and to have that pride and to learn how to navigate even their digital world. I think it's all connected. Dr. Colón, would you like to add anything?
No, I echo my colleague Selene as well. I think to have this culturally responsive teaching way of teaching, it's absolutely critical, and not only for, you know, to create engagement and, you know, for academic success, but think about it as a sustaining practice, right? We want you know, to bring the cultural, the linguistic, beautiful strengths that our students bring to our school spaces, not only for the purpose of academic success, that's very important, but also to sustain this, right? To sustain their culture, to sustain their languages, to sustain their traditions, and all the wonderful wisdom from their ancestors. So it's bottom line is really humanizing and transformational educational experiences where we're celebrating that joy, the love, and overall well-being of our students.
That is so wonderful. Thank you so much. And my wish is that we will have more teachers of color. I hope our young kids will go into teaching, because I think it is so important for them to see themselves as educators as well, and bring those experiences to their classrooms, just as the three of us have. So thank you again. And just again, just focusing on the social emotional aspect, as you began with, that's pretty much, you know, where we need to focus, especially right now during this pandemic. It's more important than ever. And then we do have one question: how can we stand up for our students? You did mention the social justice. What kinds of things can we do to stand up for our students during this time, especially?
I can answer to that. I think something that I did want to mention is I think it's important to foster relationships with community-based organizations, especially those who are providing COVID-19 relief. I think as educators, it's important to be aware of the local resources or assign someone in the school to be that community liaison. I think that's very key to connect the students back to resources that are needed, especially during this time. So that would be my recommendation.
Mm-hmm. And you did mention that working with community-based organizations for support, and you guys also offer resources on your website as well, correct?
Yes, absolutely, Vicky. We'll be, I know that those resources will be shared, but please, we'll invite you to visit our website. We keep updating, you know, the resources and everything that we do. So, and also follow us on social media. And, you know, we do provide a lot of resources in English and Spanish, which is great, right? Because that way you can have those resources in multiple languages. And we're also looking to continue serving all the, you know, the linguistic practices of our students, thinking about also our students who speak indigenous languages as well. So just thinking about that and, you know, to better serve everyone that are in our school spaces.
And standing up for our students, but also, as you mentioned, having something sustainable and even empowering those students so that they stand up for themselves, right? And that they feel confident. And that all begins, you know, with how they feel here, right? If they're welcomed, if their languages are honored, if they are honored as a whole child. So that hopefully will trickle down, and then they can stand up for themselves as well.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for being here. Again, I want to remind everybody that this will be on our YouTube channel, so check that out. And everybody have a safe and healthy holidays and happy holidays. And we will see you in the new year.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon, everyone.